I stood in the bridal suite of the Grand Plaza Hotel, staring at my reflection in the full-length mirror, not wearing the designer wedding dress that had cost my father a small fortune. Instead, I was in a sleek black cocktail dress, my carefully styled hair and professional makeup a stark contrast to what should have been my bridal look. The $12,000 Vera Wang gown hung pristinely on its hanger behind me, untouched. In exactly 2 hours, my fiancé Thomas would be standing at the altar, but I wouldn't be walking down the aisle. At least, not as he expected. The quiet hum of pre-wedding chaos filtered through the thick wooden door. Coordinators directing vendors, guests arriving, musicians setting up. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. My plan, not the one in the wedding coordinator's meticulously organized binder. My phone buzzed with another message from my maid of honor, Rachel. "She's here. Front row, left side, exactly where you said she'd be. Wearing red. Can't believe he actually did it." I smiled, running my fingers over the smooth fabric of my black dress. Of course, Jessica would wear red to her ex-fiancé's wedding. She always did have a flair for the dramatic, something Thomas had complained about during our early dating days when he was trying to convince me how different I was from his ex. "You're so mature, so sophisticated," he'd say, not attention-seeking like Jessica. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 months ago, I wouldn't have believed this day would unfold like this. I was deep in wedding preparations, experiencing all. The typical pre-wedding jitters and excitement. Thomas and I had been together for 4 years, engaged for 1, and everything seemed perfect. He was a successful corporate lawyer, I was a museum curator, and we had what everyone called a mature relationship. No drama, no games, just 2 adults building a life together. Or so I thought. My laptop pinged with an email notification. Right. On schedule. Sarah, my best friend since college and the real mastermind behind today's alternative programming, was confirming that everything was set. The attached photos showed the reception hall, decorated exactly as planned, with one crucial difference that only a handful of people knew about. Another message from Rachel. "Thomas just arrived. He's asking for you." Of course he was. The no seeing the bride before the wedding tradition would work perfectly in my favor today. He had no idea that while he'd been at his bachelor party last night, we'd executed the first phase of our plan. The same plan I'd been meticulously crafting since that rainy Tuesday evening when I discovered his betrayal. I picked up my phone, typing a quick response to Rachel. "Keep him busy. Everything's proceeding as planned." The clock on the wall showed 2 p.m., 1 hour until the ceremony. I walked to the window, looking down at the arriving guests in their formal attire, all of them expecting to witness the society wedding of the season. They would certainly witness something unforgettable, just not quite what they were expecting. My fingers traced the edge of the invitation I'd found hidden in Thomas's desk drawer 3 months ago. It wasn't the formal cream-colored invitation we'd sent to our 400 guests. No, this was different. A handwritten note to Jessica, his ex-fiancée, the woman he'd dated for 6 years before me, the one he'd claimed was ancient history. The note read, "Despite everything, I need you there. Front row, left side. Some things remained unsaid." What Thomas didn't know was that finding that invitation was just the beginning. It had led me down a rabbit hole of discoveries that revealed everything he'd been hiding during our relationship. The weekly coffee meetings that weren't with clients, the late-night texts, the mysterious business trips that coincided with Jessica's social media posts from the same cities. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. "Come in," I called out, knowing exactly who it would be. Sarah slipped inside, her bridesmaid dress impeccable, her expression a mix of concern and excitement. "Everything's in position," she whispered, even though we were alone. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" I turned back to the mirror, checking my appearance one final time. My red lipstick was perfect, not a hair out of place. I looked like a woman in control, which was exactly what I was. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I replied, picking up my clutch purse. "Is she ready?" Sarah nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "Oh yes, she's more than ready, and Thomas doesn't suspect a thing. The next hour would change everything." But then again, that was exactly the point. Sarah helped me gather my essentials into the small clutch purse, each item carefully chosen for the next phase of our plan. The USB drive containing 3 years' worth of evidence felt heavier than its actual weight. "The videographer is in position," she whispered, checking her phone. "He still thinks he's just getting standard wedding footage." I smiled, remembering how Thomas had insisted on hiring his cousin's new videography company instead of the experienced team I'd suggested. Like everything else in our relationship, he'd presented it as practical, sensible. "Why waste money on overpriced vendors?" he'd argued. He never knew that his cost-cutting decision would play perfectly into my hands. "Did you check on Madison?" I asked Sarah, referring to the crucial piece of my plan that had taken the most convincing to arrange. "She's in the second bridal suite, getting her final touches done. The resemblance is uncanny." Sarah paused, twirling her bridesmaid bouquet, nervously. "The guests who don't know you well won't notice the difference, especially from a distance." That had been the key, finding someone who could pass for me in a wedding dress, at least from the back and in profile. Madison, a rising actress from my cousin's theater company, had been perfect. Same height, similar build, and most importantly, she understood the role she needed to play. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message from my father. "Sweetheart, the coordinator's asking for you. Time for the traditional father-daughter photos. Tell him I'm dealing with a last-minute dress adjustment," I instructed Sarah. My father was one of the few people who knew the truth. The night I'd discovered Thomas's betrayal, Dad had found me sitting in his study, surrounded by printed emails and photos, crying not from sadness, but from rage. Through the wall, I could hear the string quartet beginning their pre-ceremony pieces. The same songs Thomas and I had carefully selected together during one of our many wedding planning sessions. Sessions where he'd sit next to me, holding my hand, discussing our future, all while keeping up his secret correspondence with Jessica. A light tap on the door made us both freeze. "Charlotte? Honey?" It was Thomas's mother, Barbara. "Is everything okay? Thomas is asking about you." Sarah moved quickly to the door, opening it just enough to peek out. "Everything's fine, Mrs. Anderson. Charlotte's just having a quiet moment of reflection. You know bride things." I could hear the smile in Barbara's voice. "Of course, dear. It's such a big day. I just wanted to give her something, a family tradition." The guilt in her voice was unmistakable. She knew. She had to have known about Jessica's invitation, about everything. The weekly lunches she still had with her son's ex-fiancé suddenly made perfect sense. "I'll make sure Charlotte gets it," Sarah assured her, accepting whatever it was through the crack in the door. After Barbara's footsteps faded, Sarah turned to me, holding out a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate pearl bracelet, clearly vintage. "The Anderson family bride's bracelet," I said softly. "Worn by every Anderson bride for 4 generations. What should I do with it?" I took the box, studying the pearls that would never grace my wrist. "Give it to Madison. She'll need to wear it for authenticity." My voice was steady, even as I felt a flutter of anticipation in my stomach. "It's almost time. Is everyone in position?" Sarah checked her phone one last time. "Rachel has the envelope ready to give to the officiant. The photographer's camera is loaded with the special photos. And Jessica," she smiled, "Jessica is still sitting exactly where Thomas wanted her, front row, left side, wearing that red dress like she's making some kind of statement." I stood, smoothing down my black dress one final time. In 45 minutes, Thomas would be standing at the altar, watching the back doors of the church, waiting for his bride to appear. The string quartet would play Pachelbel's canon, just as we'd planned. The guests would rise, turning to catch their first glimpse of the bride in her designer gown. But I had a different entrance in mind. The memory of that rainy Tuesday evening flooded back as I checked the time again. I'd stopped by Thomas's office to surprise him with dinner, something I rarely did. His secretary Janet's face had been strange, pitying almost, as she told me he was in a meeting. I'd nearly walked away, but something in her expression made me wait. 20 minutes later, I watched from the lobby as Jessica walked out of his office, smoothing her hair. Thomas followed moments after, adjusting his tie. They hadn't seen me, behind the massive marble column. I'd stood there, dinner growing cold in my hands, as pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known existed started falling into place. "Your father's in position," Sarah interrupted my thoughts, reading another message. "He's waiting in the side chamber, ready for phase 2. She paused, studying my face. "Charlotte, are you absolutely certain about the photos? Once we release them?" "Play the video," I instructed, wanting to remind myself why this was necessary. Sarah pulled up the footage on her phone, a security camera feed from Thomas's office building, dated just last week. There they were, Jessica and Thomas, sharing what was clearly not their first intimate moment in his private office. "I had to pay Janet quite a bit for this footage," I said, watching their betrayal play out in grainy black and white. But she was surprisingly eager to help. Apparently she's been uncomfortable with their meetings for months. A sharp knock at the door made us both jump. "5-minute warning," called the wedding coordinator. "Is the bride ready?" "Almost," Sarah called back cheerfully. She turned to me, lowering her voice. "Madison's in place. The dress looks perfect on her. Even the wedding coordinator didn't notice it wasn't you when she checked in." I nodded, pulling out my phone to type a message to the videographer. "Start recording in the groom's chamber now." I knew exactly what he would capture. Thomas sending one last text to Jessica, probably something meaningful and secret, thinking no one would ever know. My own phone buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. "Jessica, I know you found out. He doesn't love you. He never did. Don't go through with this." I showed the message to Sarah, who gasped. "The nerve! After everything!" "It's perfect," I interrupted. "Save it. We'll need it for later." I turned back to the mirror, touching up my lipstick. "Has the USB drive been connected to the reception venue's media system?" Sarah nodded. "Everything's ready. The slideshow will start exactly when you signal." She hesitated. "The guests? This will destroy him, Charlotte. His career? His reputation?" "Like he destroyed my trust?" I replied calmly. "Like he would have destroyed my life, letting me marry him while carrying on with her?" I smoothed a non-existent wrinkle from my black dress. "He made his choice 3 months ago when he sent that invitation to Jessica. I'm just helping him live with the consequences." Through the walls, we could hear the string quartet transitioning to the seating of the mothers. Barbara Anderson would be walking to her front row seat right now, probably squeezing her son's hand reassuringly as she passed him. Thomas's father, the distinguished Judge Anderson, would be beaming proudly, unaware that his son's carefully constructed facade was about to crumble. "Rachel's signaling," Sarah said, checking another message. "The official photographer just accidentally dropped his camera in front of Jessica. While he was picking it up, he got clear shots of her texting Thomas." Everything was falling into place. I picked up my clutch, checking its contents one final time. The USB drive, the original invitation to Jessica, printed copies of their messages, and a single perfect red rose, a matching twin to the one I knew Thomas would be wearing, in his boutonniere. "It's time," I said, moving toward the door. "Is Madison ready with the dress?" Sarah nodded, her expression a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. "She knows exactly what to do." Walk down the aisle, stop halfway, Then, I finished. The real show begins. I opened the door, stepping into the hushed hallway. Somewhere, in this building, 400 guests were being seated. Thomas was straightening his tie one last time, and Jessica was sitting in her red dress, thinking she'd won something. They had no idea what was coming. I made my way through the back corridors of the church, Sarah close behind me, our footsteps echoing against the ancient stone floors. The voices of guests filtered through the thick walls, a distant murmur of excitement and anticipation. A series of rapid texts lit up my phone, our carefully positioned team reporting in. "Photographer in position at the back of the church," Sarah whispered, reading over my shoulder. "He's got clear shots of both Jessica and Thomas. And the secondary photographer is hidden in the choir loft with a perfect view of the altar." We passed the church's small kitchen where the catering staff was preparing for the reception. Through the doorway, I caught a glimpse of our special addition to the staff, Marco, a private investigator I'd hired 3 months ago, disguised as a waiter. He gave me a subtle nod, confirming that his hidden cameras were rolling. My phone vibrated again. A message from Madison. "In position in the bridal suite. The dress fits perfectly. Your father's here to walk me down the aisle." I smiled, remembering the day I'd found Madison. After discovering Thomas's betrayal, I'd spent weeks searching for someone with my build and coloring. When my cousin mentioned an aspiring actress from her theater company who could be my twin from behind, it had felt like fate. Madison had understood the role immediately. This wasn't just a performance, it was justice. "Charlotte," a harsh whisper, caught my attention. Janet, Thomas's secretary, was waiting in an alcove, exactly as planned. She looked nervous, clutching her small purse. "I have what you asked for." She handed me a small envelope, her hands trembling slightly. The security footage wasn't enough. I started documenting everything after that day you came to surprise him with dinner. The dates, the meetings, the gifts he had delivered to her office. I took the envelope, adding it to my clutch. "Thank you, Janet. The bonus has already been transferred to your account." She nodded quickly and slipped away, her part in this drama complete. The organ began playing softly, signaling the start of the prelude music. Through a small window, I could see guests still being seated. The ladies in their fine dresses, men in sharp suits. Thomas's law firm partners were there in force, along with half the city's legal community. His reputation among them was impeccable. The youngest partner in the firm's history, famous for his attention to detail and unwavering preparation. "Rachel's in place," Sarah reported, checking another message. "She's got the envelope with the evidence ready to hand to the officiant at your signal." And the videographer just confirmed he got footage of Thomas sending that last text to Jessica. I checked my watch. 15 minutes until the ceremony was supposed to begin. By now, Thomas would be in the small antechamber near the altar, probably, checking his phone one last time, expecting a message from his bride. Instead, he'd see only the carefully crafted silence I'd maintained since last night. "The ushers are seating the last guests," Sarah continued. "Jessica's already tried to catch Thomas's eye twice. The photographer got both attempts on camera. A soft knock on the wall made us turn. My father stood there, looking distinguished in his tuxedo, his expression a mix of pride and concern. "Everything's set in the reception hall," he whispered. "The AV team has the presentation queued up, ready to play the moment you give the signal. Are you sure you don't want me to stay with you?" I shook my head, straightening his bow tie. "No, Dad. You need to walk Madison down the aisle. Everyone needs to believe she's me until the perfect moment." I hugged him quickly. "Just remember your cue." He nodded, squeezing my hand before heading back to the bridal suite where Madison waited. Through another window, I caught a glimpse of Thomas's mother, Barbara, dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. The same handkerchief I knew that she'd used to wipe away tears at Jessica's bridal shower 3 years ago, before Thomas had called off their first engagement. "It's almost time," Sarah whispered, showing me her phone screen. The message displayed made my heart race. "Jessica just pulled out a small gift box. She's waiting for her moment. Perfect. Let her think she still had cards to play." My hand tightened around my clutch purse, feeling the weight of the evidence inside. The real surprise was yet to come. The church bells chimed 3 times, their deep resonance vibrating through the ancient stone walls. From my hidden vantage point behind an ornate pillar, I could see the last-minute flurry of activity as the wedding coordinator hustled the remaining guests to their seats. The string quartet had shifted to the processional music for the bridal party, right on schedule. My phone lit up with a message from Madison. "Your father's here. We're ready to start. The dress, it's like it was made. For me." Of course it seemed that way. I'd had it secretly altered to fit her measurements 3 weeks ago, while telling the boutique it was just a standard adjustment for myself. Through the stained glass windows, afternoon sunlight cast colorful shadows across the church's marble floors. The same light caught the glint of something in Jessica's hands, a small silver photo frame she was discreetly trying to pass to the usher. I smiled, remembering the intelligence from our surveillance. She'd brought a photo of her and Thomas from their first engagement, planning to have it strategically placed where I would find it. "Rachel intercepted it," Sarah whispered, showing me a photo on her phone. "You'll never believe what picture she chose." It was Thomas and Jessica at his law firm's Christmas party, 3 months ago, while I was in Boston for a museum consultation, allegedly too busy to attend with him. "Add it to the presentation," I instructed, right after the office security footage. The wedding coordinator's assistant hurried past our hiding spot, clipboard clutched to her chest, whispering urgently into her headset. "Bride's ready. Yes. Everyone in position. Father of the bride standing by." Sarah grabbed my arm suddenly. "Charlotte, look." Through the crowd, I could see Thomas's best man, Michael, slipping something into the inner pocket of his suit jacket. That's not the original ring box. My heart raced. Another surprise from Thomas? I quickly typed a message to Marco, our undercover PI posing as a waiter. Within moments, he was casually walking past Michael, his hidden camera capturing whatever transaction was happening. "Got it," Sarah confirmed, watching the footage stream to her phone. "It looks like... oh my God, it's a letter." Jessica just passed it to Michael through her cousin. They're planning some kind of moment during the ring exchange. I felt a cold smile spread across my face. "Perfect. Tell Rachel to be ready with the envelope. We'll let them have their moment before we have ours." The organ music swelled, signaling the start of the ceremony. Through another archway, I could see Madison, veiled and radiant in my wedding dress, holding my father's arm. They'd practiced this moment countless times, the exact pace of their steps, the way she would hold the bouquet, how she would keep her face angled just enough to maintain the illusion from the guest's perspective. Thomas just took his place. "At the altar," Sarah reported, watching through the live stream feed on her tablet. "He looks nervous, more than usual for a groom." Of course he was nervous. He had no idea if Jessica had received his final message. No way of knowing if she would play her part in whatever scheme they'd concocted. I watched through the security feed as he shifted anxiously, adjusting his cuffs. A telling gesture I'd learned meant he was hiding something. "Janet just sent another text," Sarah whispered, showing me her phone. "Apparently Thomas called Jessica from his office yesterday. They talked for over an hour." I nodded, adding this information to my mental timeline. Did Marco plant the recording device in Thomas's dressing room? Yes, and you won't believe what he caught. Sarah's fingers flew across her phone, pulling up an audio file. Through the tiny speaker, I heard Thomas's voice. "Just stick to the plan. When the minister asks, if anyone objects, that's your moment. Charlotte will understand eventually. We can't fight what's meant to be." My hands clenched into fists, but my voice remained steady. Send that to the AV team. Add it to the presentation after the photo. The string quartet began the processional music. One by one, the bridesmaids started their carefully timed walks down the aisle. Rachel, positioned closest to Jessica, had her phone ready to capture any last-minute communications between our two conspirators. "It's time," Sarah said softly, squeezing my hand. "Madison's about to make her entrance." I watched as my father patted Madison's veiled arm, right on cue. In less than 15 minutes, Thomas's perfectly orchestrated plan would collide spectacularly with mine, and only one of us had prepared for every contingency. The processional music filled the church as Madison began her carefully choreographed walk down the aisle. From my hidden vantage point, I watched Thomas's face through the security feed on Sarah's tablet. His expression shifted from anxiety to visible relief as the bride appeared. He couldn't tell it wasn't me under the custom-made veil. "Jessica just sent another text," Sarah whispered, showing me her phone. The message read, "Almost time. Remember what we practiced. When you see my signal?" The rest was cut off, but it didn't matter. We already knew their plan thanks to Marco's surveillance. The ceremony began exactly as planned. The minister's voice echoed through the church, welcoming the guests to witness the union of Thomas Anderson and Charlotte Pierce. I noticed Barbara Anderson dabbing her eyes again, but this time her hands were shaking. Next to her, Judge Anderson sat rigidly, his face a mask of proud dignity. He had no idea that in his breast pocket was an envelope planted by Rachel, ready to be discovered at precisely the right moment. My phone vibrated silently, a message from our team monitoring the reception hall. Slideshow loaded, audio system tested, all cameras in position. Everything was ready for the second phase of our plan, but first, we had to let this play out. Madison, playing her role perfectly, stood beside Thomas at the altar. Her subtle body language, practiced for weeks, conveyed the perfect blend of bridal joy and nervousness. Thomas reached for her hand, and I saw him slip something into her palm, a small folded note that hadn't been part of our rehearsal. "Rachel caught that on camera," Sarah confirmed. "Want me to have one of the bridesmaids intercept it?" I shook my head. "Let it play out. Everything he does now just adds to our evidence." The minister continued with the ceremony, his voice carrying through the church as he spoke about love, trust, and fidelity. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who knew the truth. In the front row, Jessica shifted in her red dress, her hand repeatedly touching her clutch purse where I knew she kept their old engagement photo. A movement caught my eye. Michael, the best man, was subtly checking his phone. Sarah immediately zoomed in with our hidden camera. The text on his screen was clear. "Stick to the plan. Signal coming soon. Jay." I felt a cold smile form on my lips. They really thought they were in control of this moment, that their little scheme would play out perfectly, leaving me humiliated while they emerged as star-crossed lovers finally united. If only they knew about the private investigators, the surveillance footage, the emails we'd intercepted. The minister reached the crucial moment. "If anyone knows any reason why these two should not be joined in matrimony, speak now or forever." "Hold your peace." Sarah tensed beside me. "Here it comes." Jessica straightened in her seat, her hand moving to her designer purse. Thomas shifted almost imperceptibly, his eyes darting to the left where she sat. Michael, the best man, took a half-step forward, ready to play his part in their orchestrated drama. But we were ready too. Rachel's hand moved to her own purse, where she kept the envelope of evidence. The photographer adjusted his angle, making sure to capture every facial expression. In the choir loft, our second photographer focused his lens on Jessica, documenting every calculated move. "Charlotte," Sarah whispered urgently. "Thomas just signaled to the string quartet. They're going to play something that wasn't in the program." "Of course. Their song from their first engagement. I'd discovered the sheet music in his office last week, carefully hidden in a folder marked Contract Reviews. Another piece of their perfect plan. The minister paused, waiting the traditional moment before continuing. Jessica's hand tightened on her purse. Thomas subtly turned his head toward the string quartet. Madison, brilliant actress that she was, maintained her perfect bridal pose, giving no indication that she knew what was about to happen. "Now?" Sarah asked, her finger hovering over her phone, ready to send the signal that would set our own plan in motion. I watched as Jessica began to rise from her seat, her red dress catching the light from the stained glass windows. "Not yet," I whispered. "Let them think they've won. Just for a moment. After all, the sweetest victory comes when your opponents believe they're about to triumph, right before you show them how thoroughly they've been outplayed." The church fell into that peculiar hush that comes before a storm. Jessica stood, her red dress aflame against the muted colors of the other guests. The string quartet, on Thomas's signal, began the first notes of their song, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, a choice so predictably dramatic it almost made me laugh. "Everyone in position," Sarah whispered, rapidly typing commands to our team. Through various camera feeds, I could see it all. Rachel's hand on the evidence envelope, the photographer capturing every moment, Marco moving silently through the side aisle with his hidden camera. Jessica cleared her throat delicately, exactly as she'd probably practiced. I must speak," she announced, her voice trembling with well-rehearsed emotion. "This marriage cannot proceed." The guests gasped right on cue. Thomas, playing his part perfectly, turned to face her with expertly feigned surprise. Madison, still veiled at the altar, maintained her composed pose. We'd prepared her for this moment. "Thomas and I," Jessica continued, pulling out the photo from her purse. "We never ended. Not really. We've been meeting in secret, trying to deny our feelings, but love like ours cannot be ignored." Barbara Anderson let out a small sob. Whether from genuine distress or dramatic participation, I couldn't tell. Judge Anderson's face had turned an interesting shade of purple, his hand moving toward the planted envelope in his pocket. Michael stepped forward, right on schedule, pulling out the letter Jessica had passed him. "I have here a letter," he announced, "written by Thomas just yesterday. A letter that proves their love has endured despite everything." The minister, genuinely flustered now, looked between Thomas and the veiled bride. "Mr. Anderson, is this true?" Thomas stepped forward, and I had to admire his acting skills. He managed to look both tortured and noble as he turned to face Madison. "Charlotte, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. But Jessica's right. What we have? It's real. It's always been real." "Now?" Sarah asked, her finger hovering over her phone. "Wait," I whispered. "Let them finish their performance." Jessica moved into the aisle, tears streaming perfectly down her cheeks. I found the courage to speak because I know in her heart Charlotte must have sensed something was wrong. How could she not? When Thomas and I were meeting every week, sharing secret moments, planning for this very day. The string quartet's Moonlight Sonata reached its crescendo. Thomas moved away from Madison, toward Jessica, their staged reunion playing out exactly as they'd planned. Through my earpiece, I could hear the wedding coordinator frantically whispering to her staff, trying to manage this apparently unexpected crisis. "I have proof," Jessica announced, pulling more photos from her purse. "Photos of our meetings, our secret times together. Charlotte, if you're truly honest with yourself, you must have known. The late nights at the office, the business trips, the missed dinners." That was my cue. I pressed the button on my phone, sending the signal to Sarah. She immediately typed out the command we'd prepared. "Execute Protocol Alpha." Suddenly, the church's modern projection screens, installed for displaying hymn lyrics during Sunday services, flickered to life. The first image appeared: security footage of Thomas and Jessica in his office, dated just last week. Then another: their secret meeting at the hotel during his supposed business trip to Chicago. Email screenshots, text messages, hotel receipts, all displayed in high-resolution detail. But we weren't done. The church's sound system crackled to life, playing the recording from Thomas's dressing room, his own voice plotting this moment with Jessica, discussing how they'd humiliate me in front of everyone. The gasps from the guests this time were genuine. Jessica froze mid-speech, her mouth open in shock. Thomas spun around, trying to locate the source of the images and sound. That's when Madison, with perfect timing, reached up and removed her veil. The collective intake of breath from the congregation was audible as they realized the woman at the altar wasn't me. Thomas's face drained of color as he finally understood. His perfectly orchestrated plan had just collided with something far more meticulously planned, and I still hadn't made my entrance. Chaos erupted in the church as Madison stood confidently at the altar, my wedding dress gleaming under the lights. Thomas staggered backward, his carefully constructed facade crumbling as he looked frantically between her and Jessica. The evidence continued to play across the screens: date-stamped footage, messages, hotel receipts, each new revelation drawing fresh gasps from the guests. "That's quite a performance you both planned," Madison spoke, her voice carrying clearly through the church's perfect acoustics, "though I think Charlotte's version has a better ending." Judge Anderson had pulled out the envelope from his pocket, his hands shaking as he read its contents. "Thomas," he thundered, his face now scarlet, "there are credit card statements here. Hotel charges from the firm's corporate account." The string quartet had stopped playing, the musicians watching the unfolding drama with undisguised fascination. Jessica stood frozen in the aisle, her red dress now seeming less bold statement and more scarlet letter as photos of her secret meetings with Thomas flashed overhead. "Where is she?" Thomas demanded, his voice cracking. "Where's Charlotte?" "Right." On cue, Sarah activated the next phase. The church lights dimmed slightly, and a spotlight, installed just yesterday by our team, illuminated the side entrance. The original wedding music began playing, but now it was different. A haunting minor key version that our musicians had specially arranged. "Looking for me?" I stepped into the light, my black dress a stark contrast to the bridal white everyone expected. The guests turned en masse, phones recording every moment. Through our hidden cameras, I could see my image being projected on the screens behind the altar, the real bride, choosing to wear funeral colors to the death of her relationship. What is this?" Jessica stammered, her practiced speech forgotten as she clutched her now useless photos. "This," I announced, my voice carrying through the church's state-of-the-art sound system, "is what happens when you underestimate the wrong woman." I nodded to Rachel, who pressed another button. On her phone, new evidence appeared on the screens. Surveillance footage of Thomas and Jessica planning this very moment, discussing how they'd humiliate me before running away together. "You bugged my office?" Thomas finally found his voice, anger replacing shock. "No, Thomas. Your secretary Janet did." I smiled as his face paled further. "Turns out she has quite a conscience, and quite a collection of evidence spanning the last 3 months. Barbara Anderson had risen from her seat, swaying slightly. "The business trips, the late meetings, all documented," I confirmed, walking slowly down the aisle. "Every secret rendezvous, every stolen moment, every lie." I reached the altar, standing before them both. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? That I wouldn't notice? I'm a curator, Thomas. I piece together historical narratives for a living. Did you think I couldn't piece together your betrayal?" "Michael." The best man tried to slip away, but Marco smoothly blocked his path. "The letter, please." I held out my hand. Michael surrendered it immediately. His earlier bravado evaporated. Charlotte, Thomas stepped toward me, adopting the persuasive tone that had won him so many court cases. Let me explain. Explain what? I opened the letter, reading it aloud for all to hear. My dearest Jessica, today we finally reclaim what should have been ours all along. Quite poetic, Thomas. Did you practice that in front of your bathroom mirror, like you practiced your closing arguments? The guests sat in stunned silence as I continued reading, each flowery phrase of Thomas's secret love letter drawing more color from his face. Jessica had sunk into a pew, her perfect makeup streaked with very real tears now. You plan to humiliate me in front of everyone I love, I said, my voice never wavering, to turn my wedding day into a spectacle of your grand romance. I turned to face the congregation. Well, you certainly got the spectacle part right. The church doors opened on silent hinges as two men in suits entered quietly. Sarah leaned close to whisper in my ear. The firm's senior partners just arrived, right on schedule. The senior partners from Thomas's law firm, Harrison and Wallace, moved purposefully down the aisle. Their expressions were granite as they took in the evidence still playing across the screens. Thomas's most recent case files appeared, documents showing questionable billing practices, client meetings that never happened, expenses charged to corporate accounts for his rendezvous with Jessica. Mr. Anderson, Harrison's voice cut through the chaos like a blade, I believe we need to have an immediate discussion about your partnership status. Jessica stood up suddenly, desperation replacing her earlier confidence. This isn't what it looks like. We're in love. Everything we did was for love. Including the Jensen merger documents? I asked quietly, nodding to Sarah. New images appeared on the screens. Confidential firm documents found in Jessica's apartment, photographed by our private investigators. Interesting reading material for someone who doesn't work for the firm. Wallace's head snapped toward Thomas. The Jensen merger? The one you handled personally. His voice was deadly quiet. The one with the mysteriously favorable terms? Thomas's legal mind finally engaged, realizing the full scope of what was unfolding. You can't prove anything, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Actually, I smiled, retrieving a USB drive from my clutch. Janet kept excellent records, especially of the documents you asked her to shred. I turned to Harrison. Would you like to see how your firm's confidential client information ended up influencing stock trades from Jessica's private account? The guests were riveted, phones recording every moment. Among them sat 3 financial journalists I'd anonymously invited, their fingers flying across their phones as they documented each revelation. Thomas's perfect reputation was unraveling thread by thread. You had me followed? Jessica demanded, her voice rising hysterically. No, your doorman was just very cooperative. I nodded toward the back of the church where her building's security chief sat, another piece in my carefully arranged puzzle. Amazing what people notice when they're paid to pay attention. Judge Anderson stood up, legal training overtaking paternal loyalty. Son, don't say another word. He turned to me, professional respect evident in his expression. Young lady, I assume you've already contacted the relevant authorities? The SEC received an anonymous tip last week, I confirmed. They were particularly interested in the pattern of stock trades following certain client meetings. Barbara Anderson broke into fresh sobs, but these weren't the happy tears she'd expected to shed today. Thomas, how could you? After everything… Mom, please. Thomas tried to move toward her, but Harrison blocked his path. I believe it's time we took this discussion somewhere more private, Harrison stated firmly. Mr. Anderson, shall we? Just one moment, I interrupted, turning to face Jessica. I believe you wanted to share some photos? I held out my hand expectantly. Her fingers clutched her purse tighter. You've ruined everything, she spat. No, you did that 3 years ago. I turned to the congregation. You see, what Jessica forgot to mention in her dramatic speech was why she and Thomas broke up the first time. Would you like to tell them? Or shall I? The color drained from her face. You couldn't know about that. About the other men? The ones you were seeing while engaged to Thomas? I nodded to Sarah, who pulled up a new set of images. Your old social media accounts were very informative, as were the private messages Janet found in Thomas's email archives. A bitter laugh escaped me. You two deserve each other, really. Both so convinced of your own cleverness, so certain no one could see through your perfect facades. I turned to Thomas. Did you really think I wouldn't investigate the woman you were so obviously still involved with? That I wouldn't look into why your first engagement really ended? The senior partners had heard enough. They moved to escort Thomas toward the door, their grip on his arms professionally discreet but unmistakably firm. Jessica stood alone in the aisle, her red dress now seeming to shrink around her as the weight of exposure settled on her shoulders. Charlotte, Thomas called out, one last attempt at control. You've made your point. Now stop this. I smiled, reaching into my clutch for one final piece of evidence. Oh, Thomas, I haven't even started. I held up a small silver flash drive, watching Thomas's face contort as he recognized it. Looking for this? You really should change your safe combination. Your birth year isn't exactly secure. What's on it? Harrison demanded, his years of legal experience sensing something significant. Everything, I replied calmly, including records of certain offshore accounts that I'm sure the firm would be very interested in reviewing. Accounts that show interesting deposit patterns coinciding with major case settlements. Thomas lunged forward, but the partners held him firmly. You had no right to access my personal safe. Actually, I smiled. As your fiancé, I had every right to access our shared home office, the same office where you kept records of your meetings with Jessica, documented in your private calendar as client consultations. Sarah stepped forward, tablet in hand. The SEC investigators are waiting at the reception venue as requested. They're particularly interested in discussing the Maxwell case settlements. The Maxwell case, Thomas's crowning achievement at the firm, the one that had made him the youngest partner in its history, the case that, according to the documents I'd found, had been strategically leaked to certain investors through Jessica's connections at her investment firm. There's more, I announced, nodding to Rachel. She pressed a button, and new evidence filled the screens. Your offshore accounts weren't just for hiding money from the firm, were they, Jessica? Jessica's face, already pale, turned ghostly. You couldn't possibly know about the insider trading? The information you sold to your clients based on Thomas's cases? I turned to the financial journalists in the crowd. I believe you'll find this next part particularly interesting. The CEO. Screens displayed a complex web of transactions, all meticulously documented. Thomas's case information flowing to Jessica, Jessica's investment recommendations to her clients, the resulting stock movements, and the money trail leading back to hidden accounts. 4 years of securities fraud, I announced to the stunned congregation. All perfectly documented, thanks to Janet's meticulous record-keeping and your own arrogance in believing no one would ever connect the dots. Judge Anderson stood up, his legal mind processing the implications. The Morrison case, the Thompson settlement, they were all compromised. I finished for him. Every major case Thomas handled after reconnecting with Jessica showed the same pattern. Information leaked, stocks traded, profits hidden. Barbara Anderson had stopped crying, her society matron's composure cracking as she realized the full implications for the family's reputation. Thomas, tell me this isn't true. But Thomas couldn't speak. He was staring at the screens, watching his carefully constructed world implode. The prestigious law career, the sterling reputation, the perfect image, all crumbling under the weight of evidence he'd thought safely hidden. Mr. Anderson, Harrison's voice was ice. Consider yourself suspended from the firm, effective immediately. Wallace, call security to secure his office. No one enters until our forensic team has been through everything. Jessica made one last, desperate attempt. Charlotte, please. You've made your point. We can talk about this privately, like you plan to talk about your relationship with Thomas privately? I held up my phone, displaying a draft press release. The media will have quite a story. Prestigious law firm partner and investment banker caught in years-long securities fraud scheme. Your clients will be particularly interested in how their investments were manipulated. The church doors opened again. 2 SEC agents entered discreetly, taking positions near the exits. Thomas saw them and finally understood. This wasn't just about exposing his infidelity. This was about dismantling everything he'd built on a foundation of lies. "You've destroyed us," he whispered, defeat replacing his earlier arrogance. "No, Thomas," I corrected him, my voice carrying clearly through the hushed church. "You did. That yourself. I just made sure everyone could see the truth." Sarah leaned in close, whispering urgently. "Charlotte, the FBI agents just arrived at the reception venue. They're requesting immediate access to the evidence." I nodded, then turned back to the shocked congregation. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize, but it seems we'll have to cancel the reception. I believe several people here have some rather important meetings to attend." The church had transformed from a wedding venue into what felt like a crime scene. SEC agents moved efficiently through the space, collecting evidence and taking preliminary statements. The financial journalists were already filing their stories, their faces illuminated by phone screens as they rushed to break the news that would rock the legal and financial communities. "Charlotte," Sarah whispered urgently. "Jessica's trying to delete something from her phone." I nodded to the nearest, SEC agent, who smoothly intercepted Jessica before she could finish. "Ma'am, that device is now considered evidence. Please hand it over." The look of panic on Jessica's face confirmed we'd caught her at exactly the right moment. The agent quickly secured her phone in an evidence bag, along with Thomas's device, that had already been confiscated. "The firm's ethics committee is convening an emergency meeting," Rachel reported, checking her messages. "They're requesting all the evidence regarding the Maxwell case immediately." I turned to Harrison and Wallace, who were still processing the magnitude of what their youngest partner had done. "I've prepared complete dossiers for each compromised case. They're being delivered to your offices as we speak." Thomas, now seated, in a front pew under the watchful eye of security, looked broken. His perfectly styled hair was disheveled, his bespoke wedding suit wrinkled. The man who'd stood before judges and juries with unshakable confidence was reduced to watching helplessly as his crimes were documented in real time. "Mrs. Anderson," I approached Barbara, who sat rigid with shock. "I think you should know, the Foundation's accounts were untouched. I made sure the charitable works wouldn't be affected by this." She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "You knew. All this time. And you still protected the Foundation?" "The Children's Hospital shouldn't suffer for Thomas's actions," I replied softly. "I may have wanted justice, but not at the expense of innocent people." Judge Anderson was in deep discussion with the SEC agents, his judicial demeanor cracking, as he learned more details about his son's activities. I caught fragments of their conversation: statute of limitations, federal charges, conspiracy to commit fraud. "The reception venue is secured," Sarah reported. "FBI forensic teams are going through everything, and Charlotte—" She paused, showing me her tablet. "Jessica's firm just issued an emergency statement distancing themselves from her actions. They're launching an internal investigation." A commotion near the church entrance drew our attention. Michael, who had been trying to slip away unnoticed, was being detained by agents. "Sir, we need to discuss the documents found in your briefcase." Of course, Thomas hadn't just involved Jessica in his schemes. His best man had played his own role, helping to launder funds through his real estate developments. Another domino, falling exactly as planned. Madison approached me, still wearing my wedding dress, but now with an air of professional satisfaction rather than bridal joy. "The acting job is complete," she said quietly, though I never expected quite this much drama in the role. I handed her an envelope. "Your payment as agreed, plus a bonus for handling the unexpected developments so smoothly." "Charlotte," Thomas called out suddenly, his voice hoarse. "How long? How long were you investigating us?" I walked over to him, maintaining a safe distance as security watched closely. "From the moment I found Jessica's invitation in your desk. Did you really think?" "I wouldn't notice the changes in you. The late nights, the secret phone calls, the sudden business trips. But the evidence, the surveillance." "I'm a curator, Thomas. My entire career is built on piecing together historical narratives, finding connections others miss. You left a trail. I just had to follow it." Sarah appeared at my side. "The press is gathering outside. CNN is requesting a statement about the impact on pending legal cases." Through the church's stained glass windows, I could see camera flashes, beginning to illuminate the gathering dusk. What had started as a society wedding was about to become the biggest financial scandal of the year. "One last thing," I said, turning back to Thomas. "The prenup you insisted on? The one designed to protect your assets?" I allowed myself a small smile. "You really should have had someone else review it. The fraud clause is particularly interesting." The media frenzy outside the church was growing by the minute. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching into the darkening sky like mechanical trees. Inside, the SEC agents were coordinating with local law enforcement to arrange secure transport for Thomas and Jessica. "The story's gone national," Sarah reported, showing me her tablet. Headlines were already appearing. "Wedding day revelations expose major financial fraud. Top lawyer and ex-fiancé caught in securities scandal. Bride unveils years of corporate corruption at the altar." Jessica, now seated separately from Thomas under agent supervision, had finally stopped trying to defend herself. Her designer makeup was streaked with tears, her carefully crafted image of the wronged first love shattered by evidence of her own criminal activities. "Charlotte," Judge Anderson approached, his judicial composure barely masking his turmoil. "The FBI wants to know the offshore accounts. How did you find them?" "The same way I found everything else, Your Honor. I followed the money." I nodded to Sarah, who pulled up a detailed financial flowchart on her tablet. Every time Thomas handled a major case, there were corresponding transactions through a series of shell companies. Companies that, interestingly enough, all had registration, dates matching significant moments in his relationship with Jessica. Barbara Anderson had moved to sit with her charity board members, who had gathered protectively around her. They were already strategizing how to distance the foundation from the scandal, protecting years of philanthropic work from her son's misdeeds. "The firm's managing partners just released a statement," Rachel announced, reading from her phone. "Harrison Wallace and Associates is shocked and dismayed by these allegations. We are fully cooperating with authorities and have launched a comprehensive internal review of all cases handled by Thomas Anderson." I watched as Michael was led out in handcuffs, his role in the money laundering scheme now fully exposed. The real estate developments he'd used to clean Thomas's illegal profits would likely be his downfall. The investigators had already found evidence of falsified permits and bribed officials. "Your father's handling the press outside," Sarah informed. "Me. He's presenting it exactly as we planned. A daughter's devastating discovery of corruption, choosing justice over personal happiness." Madison approached, now changed out of my wedding dress into professional attire. "The acting guild will love this," she said with a slight smile. Undercover work wasn't exactly what I trained for, but it certainly tested my skills. Through the church's windows, camera flashes continued to illuminate the growing crowd of reporters. The story was irresistible, A society wedding transformed into a sting operation. A corrupt lawyer exposed by his own bride, years of financial crimes laid bare at the altar. They're ready to transport them, an FBI agent informed me quietly. We'll need your statement at the field office tomorrow morning. I nodded, watching as Thomas and Jessica were prepared for their exit. They would leave the church separately, their dreams of a dramatic reunion replaced by the reality of federal indictments and public disgrace. "Charlotte?" Thomas called out one last time, his voice barely carrying across the space between us. "Was any of it real? Us?" I met his eyes steadily. "As real as your love for Jessica, as real as your professional ethics, as real as every lie you told while building this house of cards." I turned away, addressing Sarah instead. "Make sure the evidence about the Thompson case reaches the State Bar Association. They'll want to review his license." The church bells tolled, marking the hour when we should have been celebrating at our reception. Instead, the catering staff, all carefully vetted members of our investigative team, were helping federal agents document and preserve evidence. Ms. Pierce, one of the financial journalists, approached cautiously. "Would you be willing to provide a statement about how you uncovered this scheme?" I smiled, thinking of the months of careful planning, the sleepless nights gathering evidence, the elaborate choreography that had led to this moment. "Sometimes," I replied, "the best way to expose the truth is to let people think they're getting away with their lies." Through the stained glass windows, the last rays of sunlight cast colorful shadows across the church floor, illuminating the scene of my greatest curatorial work, piecing together not historical artifacts, but a modern tale of corruption, betrayal, and justice. As evening settled over the church, the aftermath of my elaborate revelation continued to unfold. The SEC and FBI agents had established a temporary command center in what should have been our reception venue, converting the elegant ballroom into an evidence processing station. "The firm's senior partners are requesting an emergency meeting with you tomorrow," Sarah informed me, scrolling through her messages. "They want to discuss the full scope of compromised cases. Apparently, Thomas's files are revealing more irregularities by the hour." Janet, Thomas's secretary, had arrived at the church after being summoned by investigators. She stood with quiet dignity as she handed over additional files. "There's something else you should know," she told me softly. "The Morrison case. It wasn't just insider trading. Thomas deliberately suppressed evidence that would have helped the plaintiffs." I nodded, having already suspected as much. "Send everything to the State Bar Association. They'll need it for their ethics investigation." Through the church windows, I could see Thomas and Jessica being led to separate vehicles, their grand exit now a perp walk captured by dozens of news cameras. The red dress Jessica had chosen to make a statement at my wedding would now be immortalized in very different headlines. "Charlotte," my father approached, looking both proud and concerned. "Barbara Anderson asked to speak with you. She's in the church office." I found Thomas's mother sitting alone, the Anderson family bride's bracelet clutched in her trembling hands. "I knew," she whispered as I entered. "Not about the fraud, but about Jessica. I saw them together last month, at the country club. I told myself it was innocent, that I was imagining things. The foundation will be protected," I assured her, sitting down nearby but not too close. "I made sure the evidence clearly separates the charity's work from Thomas's activities." She looked up, her perfectly maintained society facade cracking. "Why? After what he did to you?" "Because some things are more important than revenge," I replied simply. "The children's hospital shouldn't suffer because your son couldn't choose between greed and ethics." Rachel appeared in the doorway. "Charlotte, the FBI needs you to verify some dates regarding the offshore transfers. And there's something else. They found additional accounts under Jessica's grandmother's name." Of course, the sweet old lady who had supposedly left Jessica a small fortune last year. Another thread in their web of deception, now unraveling under federal scrutiny. Madison joined us, having finished her debriefing with the investigators. "The video evidence has been secured," she reported professionally. "They were particularly interested in Thomas's reaction when he realized I wasn't you at the altar." "The guests are finally all gone," Sarah added, checking her tablet. "Except for the journalists. They're still hoping for additional statements." Barbara stood slowly, her socialite's training asserting itself even in crisis. "I should make a statement, shouldn't I? About the foundation, at least." "Already prepared." I handed her a carefully worded press release. "This will protect the charity's interests while acknowledging the situation appropriately." My phone buzzed. A message from Harrison. The firm was already implementing damage control, reaching out to clients whose cases might have been compromised by Thomas's actions. Their reputation would take a hit, but transparency was their best option now. "Judge Anderson is recusing himself from all cases connected to the firm," Rachel reported, reading from her phone. "The Judicial Ethics Board is launching a review, but preliminary findings show he had no knowledge of Thomas's activities." I moved to the window, watching as the last police cars pulled away from the church. This wasn't the evening I had once imagined when Thomas proposed, but it was the ending this story needed. "Janet found something else," Sarah said quietly, joining me at the window. "Draft prenup revisions on Thomas's computer. He was planning to change the terms right before the wedding, using the chaos of last-minute preparations as cover." I smiled slightly. He never did understand that details matter, that someone would notice. Outside, the media crews were setting up for their evening broadcasts. Tomorrow, the story would be everywhere. The society wedding that exposed a web of financial fraud, the bride who chose justice over love, the perfect couple whose facade cracked under the weight of truth. 1 week later, I stood in my office at the museum, watching news coverage of Thomas and Jessica's arraignment on multiple federal charges. The story had dominated headlines, spawning countless articles analyzing every detail of the wedding day, revelation, and its aftermath. "The SEC just released their preliminary findings," Sarah reported, entering with her ever-present tablet. "They're calling it one of the most sophisticated financial fraud schemes they've uncovered this year. The total amount involved is approaching 9 figures. I turned from the window, where rain streaked down the glass like tears I'd never shed. And the firm's internal review? Complete devastation. They found evidence of misconduct in almost every major case Thomas handled since reconnecting with Jessica. The managing partners are personally reaching out to all affected clients." She paused, checking a new message. "The State Bar Association has suspended his license pending their ethics investigation." The museum's board had been surprisingly supportive, impressed by my investigative skills, rather than scandalized by my involvement in exposing the fraud. In fact, they'd just approved my proposal for a new exhibition. "Deception Through History, The Art of Uncovering Truth." "Michael took a plea deal," Rachel announced, joining us with fresh coffee. "He's trading information about the real estate schemes for a reduced sentence. Apparently, there were more corrupt officials involved than we initially thought." Barbara Anderson had thrown herself into saving her foundation's reputation, using the crisis to highlight their commitment to transparency and ethical governance. Judge Anderson had announced his early retirement, choosing to focus on rebuilding his family's name through charitable works. "Janet's been offered a position with the FBI's Forensic Accounting Division," Sarah continued. "They were impressed by her attention to detail in documenting everything." I smiled, remembering the quiet secretary who had played such a crucial role in exposing the truth. "Make sure she gets that recommendation letter we prepared. She deserves every opportunity." My phone buzzed with a message from Madison. Her performance as the fake bride had caught the attention of several theater directors. She'd just been cast as the lead in a new play about corporate whistleblowers, art imitating life in the most ironic way. "The wedding vendors have all been paid," Rachel reported. "Most of them doubled their invoices once they realized they were actually part of a sting operation. The videographer is particularly pleased. His footage has been subpoenaed as evidence." I picked up the morning paper, where a small article caught my eye. Jessica's investment firm had fired her and was facing its own investigation. Their clients were fleeing in droves, and her carefully cultivated network of social connections had evaporated in the wake of the scandal. "Your father's interview with the Times is running tomorrow," Sarah mentioned. "He focuses on the importance of ethical behavior in business and the courage to stand up for what's right. The prosecutor's office has already quoted it in their press releases." The Anderson family bride's bracelet sat in its velvet box on my desk, returned by courier with a note from Barbara. "This belongs with someone who truly understands the value of truth." I'd already arranged to donate it to the museum's collection, a piece of history with quite a story to tell. "The final tally from the evidence is impressive," Rachel said, reviewing her notes. 3 law firms launching internal reviews, 2 investment companies under investigation, 6 real estate developments frozen, and a dozen offshore accounts seized. I turned back to the window, where the rain had finally stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the city. Somewhere in a federal holding facility, Thomas and Jessica were learning the true cost of their betrayal. Their dreams of a dramatic wedding day revelation had come true, just not in the way they'd planned. "The press still wants your full story," Sarah reminded me gently. "What should I tell them?" I picked up a vintage magnifying glass from my desk, a tool of my trade, used to examine historical artifacts for hidden details. "Tell them that truth, like revenge, is best served with careful preparation and perfect timing. And that sometimes—" I smiled, watching the sunlight refract through the glass. "The most important exhibits are the ones that tell us who we really are."